Well, hello and welcome back to our course at overnightaccountant.com on realtors and reducing taxes. Obviously, we're still discussing expenses on Schedule C. This section, however, is going to be the first section to discuss meals and entertainment. And as you see there, that is line 24B. Different previous sections, we were discussing travel in several sections of the course. This part of the course is probably going to be 3 to 4 more sections because this is a pretty complex topic, and we want to make sure you get every deduction you're entitled to. So this is line 24B, and this section is pretty broad. We're going to start with travel meals because it ties into travel, which we discussed in the earlier section. Again, there's a report on line 24B. Now just remember that 50% of the cost of your travel meals are deductible. Be careful with the software, however. Make sure that you're entering it properly and make sure it's calculating it properly, because there's certain types of meals or types of food that can be 100% deductible under certain circumstances. So make sure you're putting your travel meals in where it's 50% deductible. So make sure your software is calculating it out at 50% showing up on the return. Also, if you're using a professional or preparer, make sure they know the amounts that you're providing. Are you giving 50%? Are you giving them 100%? Believe it or not, quite a few circumstances over the years, quite a few instances rather over the years where we've had a client give us, a certain amount for meals and entertainment or even their travel meals, and they've given us 50% of the amount rather than giving us 100% and didn't let us know that. So they kind of ripped themselves off a little bit on that deduction. We had to go back and fix it later because sometimes these are substantial. So even though you may know it's 50% is the amount that's deducted, make sure your professional knows whether you're giving them 100% or 50%. If you don't clarify, they're probably going to assume you're giving them 100%. Now there's 2 types of travel meals, 2 types of meals you may have while you're traveling on business. Now these are your own meals or meals you would have for yourself during business travel. And then there are also business meals which you would have with clients or others during business travel that would also be deductible. So we're going to discuss those 2 types of expenses here. We're going to start with your travel meals. Now these are really normal meals you would have during business travel days. These are not meals with the client or for a business meeting. So those are 2 basic differences there. We're going to be normal meals. Normal, I have that in quotes because they're meals for you that you would, most folks have to eat every day, and these will be the normal meals you have during the day. Now, only your meals count, and these are the meals that are on business days. Remember from the travel section, we have business days and non-business days. Days that count as business days, these are for your meals, those that occur on business days. Now, you can take the standard deduction allowance, what's called a standard daily allowance, which is also called a per diem amount you can take for each day of business travel, or you can take actual costs. Business travel is really the only time, I'll make sure you're with us, it's the only time you're really going to be able to deduct meals that you have alone. And you notice I have explanation points there because there's a lot of confusion with regard to this. Generally, anytime you eat alone, particularly at a local level, it's not going to be deductible for meals and entertainment expense. But business travel, however, is an exception. If you're traveling, you can take a deduction. Primarily, I believe, is because the IRS knows usually if you have to eat out while you're traveling, it's going to cost you substantially more than what eating by yourself. However, that's probably another reason why it's only 50% is deductible. Now, let's look at the standard meal allowance. This is the per diem we discussed in the earlier section. Now, this changes every year. So 2016 and 2017 is $51 in most places, and most years you're going to see it's going to be between $50 and $55. I'm not going to tell you the rate here. That's something you can look up on your own. However, we'll let you know that higher areas, there are higher cost cities that the IRS will let you know about, and those are really anywhere from $60 to $75 for higher cost areas. And as you can imagine, for certain cities like New York, San Francisco, and other areas like that, $60 to $75, even if you're eating by yourself and having to eat at restaurants, that may not cover all your costs. So that's why you're allowed to take the actual expenses too, which we'll discuss later. Now, the rates are set annually by the GSA, or the General Services Administration of the United States, and they create calculate the per diem for continental United States, or CONUS, as you can see here. Now, if you want to look this up on your own, there's the website you can go to see what the per diems are. As I said, they change on an annual basis. Usually don't change a lot, but they do change. Now, there's different rates for Hawaii, Alaska, and the U.S. territories, and those are set by the Department of Defense, believe it or not. And there's an address to their website, Defense Travel, DOD. You can read the rest of that there if you want to get the rates for yourselves. The IRS will accept those for if you're going to Hawaii, Alaska, or U.S. territories. Also, I want to let you know, I don't know if we'll bring it up here in a couple minutes or not, But the foreign travel, which we discussed earlier, we're really not going to discuss foreign travel in this course. Whole separate set of rules for that, and it's relatively rare, and you definitely want to get a professional involved if you're planning to do any foreign travel for business. Hopefully your preparing software should know the proper rates to apply. You may want to double check it and make sure. Hopefully through your software to ask you where you went in your travels and what rate to apply. A lot of the software, if you're doing this yourself, it may not know the different rates for cities. So it may be worth you to look it up on those websites to make sure that you're getting the full deduction of what you're able to take. Okay, so what's included in the standard meal allowance? This is really going to be your 3 meals a day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. It also includes taxes and tips that are related to your dinner. So you don't get an extra deduction if you're a big tipper. So remember that also, that, that $51 a day with, 3 meals plus your tips. It may be better in many instances to go through the hassle of tracking those receipts, keeping everything to maximize your deduction. It also includes an amount for incidental expenses, and that's $3 on a daily basis. And what this is really for, just so you know, because you can't deduct it separate later as travel, that is really tips to hotel staff, baggage handlers, importers. Those are the 3 items that were really included in that. So other items you may be able to still deduct the travel expense. However, just remember these. You don't want to double dip. $3 of that $51 or whatever the amount is per day is for fees and tips associated with incidental expenses related to your travel. Now, in the rare instance that you don't have any meal costs for the day, you're not really going to have any meal allowance. However, you can still deduct $5 per day for incidentals, believe it or not. And that is actually, you can deduct 100% of that. Now, what are some items that are not incidental expenses? These are items in travel. If you track it and you have receipts, you can also deduct separately as a travel expense, not meals and entertainment. These would be 100% deductible. Your laundry and clothing care, telephone and internet charges, which we discussed in the travel section. Also your transportation costs, let's say taxi, bus, and subway. That would be more of a travel expense. It's not included in the incidental. So just keep that in mind. These are all travel expenses, as I said. So as we move through here, let's calculate the standard meal allowance. Let's go through a couple. I think we have 2 examples here. Calculate standard meal allowance. What you want to do is you're going to calculate the number of business days, number of days that qualify as business days. Remember that from the travel section of the course. And the days to and from your location for purposes of the meal allowance or the per diem, those count as 3/4 days. So 2 travel days ends up being 1.5 days. So the next step is all you're going to do is multiply the rate by the number of business days you're on travel. See this section, earlier sections we discussed what travel days were, as I said earlier. That's line 24A. That's where those items are deducted for travel. Remember, only 50% deductible. You can deduct $5 per day, as I said earlier, for meals and incidentals. So if you don't have any, again, if you don't have any meals, rare, but it's 100% deductible, as I said. A couple examples here. Okay, let's say you fly to a 3-day seminar, you leave Monday, and you return Friday. So it's a 3-day seminar, but you're gone all week. So Monday's your travel day, that's 3/4 of a day. Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, 3 days of going to the seminar. Friday, you return. So you're gone actually 5 days. Now, but that's going to end up being 3 full days plus 1.5 because of 2 travel days. So you got 3.5 days there. What you want to do to calculate, 4.5 times 51, which is the current rate for most locations. This may change when you're doing your own return. You'll be watching this several years after we prepare this course. Just remember the $51 is what it currently is. It may have changed when you prepare your own taxes. So you'll be a deduction of $229 for the 4.5 days. Well, that's your expense amount. You take 50% of that is actually going to be your deduction. It's $114.75. But look at this, just by tracking those days, you just saved almost $50 in taxes as a potential tax savings. Those items add up. It's important that you track all of these items. Now, let's look at example 2. You fly to a 3-day seminar, but you leave Sunday on this day and you return Friday, and this time you take your spouse. Okay? Now your seminar is Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. However, remember, you stay till Friday. You take the day and you sightsee on Thursday. So it's kind of your itinerary for the week. Now Sunday's a travel day. That's 3/4 of a day. Seminar days, you're there for 3. Now let's say for practical purposes that Thursday's a personal day. If you recall in travel, we discussed what a sandwich day was. That day, for whatever reason, does not qualify as a sandwich day because the cost of going to and from, or for whatever reason, going to and from where you travel to, are actually less expensive than staying. So it's not a sandwich day. Now Friday's another 3/4 of a day. So once again, you end up with 4.5 days. That's 3 full days plus 1.5 days of travel, 4.5 days total. Calculate it again, 4.5 times 51 is 229.50. Same deduction as the earlier example. 114.75 deduction. Again, tax savings of nearly $50. Potential tax savings for you. So track those days, they add up. Let's say a couple notes here. Remember, you took your spouse on example number 2. Spouse's meals are not a deductible per diem or really for any type of cost, nor are her travel expenses for her. And let's say if there was no flight available on Thursday, say you went somewhere where you had to fly and you could not find a flight out on Thursday, you couldn't get back home, it was going to be more expensive, or for whatever reason you had to stay due to facts and circumstances, Thursday may also qualify under those circumstances. It might qualify as a sandwich day. So then you would have 5.5 days rather than 4.5 days. So just to show you that example there, just remember, facts and circumstances change everything. Now, what are you going to need to have to prove your deduction? Now, you really only need, if you're doing the per diem, you're not taking actual expenses, you really only need to be able to prove the number of days you were gone, the dates you were gone, and the purpose of the business travel. And business days, remember we discussed that in an earlier section. Go back and review that if you have any questions. Or you also probably want to review it while you're preparing your return to make sure you're doing it properly and maximizing your deduction. So you do not need to keep receipts for each meal. Okay? You just need to prove the days you were gone because it is a per diem. So here's some notes, more notes on the standard of mileage allowance. It's relatively simple. It's really, oftentimes you're going to find when you go through and you try to figure out what if you're pinching your pennies and you're kind of thrifty, you may find it's actually a much better deduction if you're not doing city travel in really expensive areas than what you actually spend. So it depends on where you eat and the type of food you eat, but you may find it's very fair for non-city travel. It's probably going to be low, however, if you're in the high-cost areas we discussed earlier. And it may make travel business meals with others not deductible. So if you're traveling with other individuals, even for business meals per se, and you're taking a standard mileage allowance, standard meal allowance, you may not be entitled to a deduction for those otherwise business meals because you're taking standard mileage allowance. Now, it only can be used for business travel, and that's travel overnight. The standard meal allowance is not, and I say not allowed for local meals you would have in your area. Business meals we'll discuss in the section coming up, or one of the sections coming up, not deductible for that. Now, you must use for all your travel, you must use for the whole year. You cannot use the allowance for some trips and days and then actual for others. So it's important to remember that. Whatever your choice is, it's often a good idea to keep receipts just to see what you add up later if you know you're going to be doing a lot of travel during the year. But you must use for the entire year. You can't use the allowance on some trips and then use actual meals on other trips. Now, also let you know that different rules apply for employees. So sometimes we have here, these are rules with regard to self-employment. If you're an employee, generally these rules are correct. However, there are differences between the rules for being self-employed and an employee, particularly when it comes to reimbursement. So let me give you a tip here: plan ahead. So if you're planning travel to an expensive city during the year, make sure you keep receipts for all your business travel during the year, because it may add up to a much larger deduction than you would otherwise have with just standard meal allowance. If the meals involve business meetings during the year, also keep receipts. Remember, those business meals add up, if you're having it with other individuals, they may be higher than standard meal allowance. So just remember to keep your receipts during those business meetings with others that qualify as a business meeting. Use your business account during the year also, as we discussed in the earlier sections, many sections. Use a separate account for all your expenses and pay for your personal meals separately. So if you're taking your spouse or anyone else with you on a trip, just remember I would almost get 2 receipts for everything, 2 bills for everything, let's say, and then pay for your personal out of your business account. That is really aid you in your record keeping. So let's move forward here. Yeah, Maria had standard meal allowance. Now let's discuss actual meal costs. How to deduct actual meal costs, because you have the option standard for the year or actual for the year. So this may actually, as I said earlier, result in a higher deduction overall if you're able to keep all your receipts. It requires meal receipts for business days. However, you're going to find that certain rules in the IRS code that says you don't need a detailed expense log if it's less than $75. However, my suggestion is that you keep your receipts, keep all your receipts, and keep detailed expense logs of everything you spend, even during travel. We don't want to have problems here. Okay, only 50% is deductible, just like the per diem. Only your costs are deductible for regular travel meals, and that's really what I mean by that is travel meals with you alone, or if you're with with anybody else, say your spouse or significant other, or your kids are on the trip with you. Only your costs are deductible. Also, business meals can also be deductible, what you have with other individuals. And this is, business meals would also be deductible if you have a lot of meetings that you're going, you're taking others out to dinner or lunch for your job. That would be really, it can really add up to a much higher deduction. Only meals on business days count, just like your per diem, and only your business meals count. Business days only, see travel section. Meals while on business travel count. There is no three-quarter limit. So if you are traveling for the day and you keep your receipts and you're claiming actual expenses, that three-quarter limit for travel days, that is the standard meal allowance, that does not apply. So you can actually claim that whole amount, and then you can take 50% of that for your meals on travel days. Individual meals costs are seldom scrutinized. So the amount of your meals are really not scrutinized very often by the IRS, but be reasonable. And just make sure you can prove your deductions, particularly with the actual expense method. So it's an area that's seldom scrutinized as long as you have the proof to back it up. Remember, you must use actual or the standard meal allowance for all travel during the year. As I said in the standard mileage allowance section, you must choose one or the other for the whole year. So oftentimes it's best to keep receipts during the year and then see it up. The difference could be significant enough to not just track your days, but also keep receipts for everything if you're the kind of person that's actually that organized and able to do it. If you use a standard mileage allowance for business meals with clients, may not be deductible. So I want you to get a professional in that area. And what I mean is, if you remember, you got to use them all for the year, standard allowance or actual. So if you started using the standard and didn't keep receipts for a bunch of meals during the year, and then you have a trip suddenly where you're wining and dining a lot of potential clients or customers, you may actually lose a lot of that deduction because you may be kind of stuck with the standard allowance. So you don't have the receipts to prove the actual. So if you're in that situation, also just this area I'd recommend getting a professional for that. So let's discuss business meals during travel. Now these are meals you would have with others for the purpose for business purposes while traveling. So these are meals with third party, with clients or somebody else. They follow the same rules as non-travel business meals, which we are actually going to discuss in the next section. But these are meals you would have with clients or prospects, or really a potential broker, anybody that would qualify as a business meal while you're traveling away from home for a business purpose. Your meal is deductible with claiming actual expenses for travel meals. So your meal with others would be deductible if you're claiming actual expenses for business travel meals. Again, as I said earlier, get a professional for that section or for that situation. And that is it for this section. We'll see you next one where we continue to discuss meals and entertainment.